Good evening, everyone. I'm Sandra Brock from the ALPS Construction. We're excited to have you here tonight on this cold evening. Thank you so much for coming. We did want to let you know the meeting is being recorded because we did offer to parents that if they were not able to come, that we would send them an actual video of the meeting. But I'm going to turn it over to our committee team to introduce themselves. Also,
hi, I am Sarah Haynes. Thanks so much for coming tonight. I'm the district literacy coordinator, and we welcome you here.
Hello. Yeah, Chris Jacobs. I'm trying to work around the poll. Chris Jacobs, I'm a parent of an ALPS student. I'm a parent of a student at Thornton Creek, and I teach at the high school. And I was an ALPS student like 30 years ago, so I was really excited to get to be on the committee.
I'm Nisa Klizzy. The poll is a little strange, isn't it?
It is.
So I am a parent of a third grader who our homeschooled Ammerman. She's in Silver Springs now. She's back up there. And I too, a little more than 30 years ago, I was a former ALPS student in Northfield Public Schools as well. No, I'm older than you.
I'm Ann Bressler. I am a parent of a second grader at Thornton Creek and an ALPS fourth grader at Ammer. I grew up in Motown.
Hi, I'm Betsy Weekland, and my son is in fourth grade at Ammerman as well.
Hi, I'm Devin Huddle. I am the principal at Ammerman.
And I'm Katie Booth, the principal here at Silver Springs.
it's everyone. So parents may still be coming in. And I think we'll just start presenting. We do have an opportunity for questions at the end. So certainly if you have questions, we'll provide time for that, either for the good of the order, or if you want to stay after, you can stay after and answer the question.
And just so you know, it is being recorded, just for people who couldn't come.
Okay, we're gonna kind of trade off here. Our parents are gonna present, as well as the other committee members. So, but I welcome questions along the way, or committee members, feel free to jump in. So like I said, I am, my child went through this process of, we thought we were going to Ammerman, and we came to Silver Springs, so she's third grade, and we're going back to Ammerman next year. So we'll tell you all about that. But today what we wanted to do is share with you, what we went through to come up with this short-term recommendation for ALPS. So we want to share the process, the data, the factors that we considered, the conversations we had, to let you know that we did go through a thorough process, talked a lot about the kids, a lot about families, a lot about teachers. It was very thorough, and we're very confident in the recommendation that we have. And so we hope that you walk away from just an understanding of the recommendation, what it is, what it means for your children. Also just confident in the process that was followed. So, confident in the committee, the data that we considered, the input that we considered, and then that where next steps are. What's coming, waiting for people to input. And then also this is the short term that we're talking about today. So part of our next steps is be talking about how we get to that longer term recommendation decision. So just a couple notes as we go through this. So one is on the next page, there's no perfect answer. We wish that we could, everyone could get everything that they wanted, but is that realistic in any place in life? I don't know. But so there are lots of things to consider. And actually, I'll tell you, I learned a lot going through this process. I came in thinking some things and then added to those as we went through this process. So we'll share some of those with you. So there's just so many, it's very complex, lots of things to consider. So there's no perfect answer. But again, we're confident in the factors that we considered, the conversations that we had, the data. And you'll hear more about that today. The second thing is today's not about discussion. We have a recommendation. That said, please share input because there's a longer term solution to talk about. So we just want to say the short term has been decided, but the longer term, will still be. And then lastly, the purpose of the committee, one is to make a recommendation to the Board of Education on what we in January for what we recommend for the short term for ALPS. So we're addressing the short term. We did discuss long term, so that was part of our committee charter. There's more to come there. And for both those, the short term and the long term, we considered a number of factors. And again, we'll go through the details there. But one of the biggest considerations is space constraints. We talked about student needs, teacher needs, parent feedback, and all of that. So that was our charter. That's what we need to do as a committee. And we'll tell you more about who's on the committee. And it's Betsy.
Thank you. So this is a list of folks who participated in this committee. And as you can see, we had representation from all 6 of the elementary schools. It does tend to be a little Ammerman heavy because a lot of these parents are ALPS parents. And so they have kids at Ammerman regardless of where their homeschool is. And so sometimes you can see that happening, right? And a lot of these are parents, but we also had teachers and administrators because we wanted to get all around perspective. And one of the things that I really want to drive home is that since so many of the folks on the committee were parents, teachers, administrators, our first priority in all of this was what's best for these kids. Because they're literally our kids, just like they're literally your kids. And so whatever we came to, we wanted to make sure that we had their best interest as top priority, because we love our kids and we want what's best for them. So we can go to the next slide. To that end, we had some key priorities. So as a group, we brainstormed a whole list of what should be priorities when we are considering recommendations for both short-term and long-term. And as you can see, over 47% of the top 2 priorities came out to be disruption or consistency for students and social development impact. Because again, we just really want to make sure that we're doing right by these kids and that we're not putting in place systems that are going to be harder for them than necessary. So we really wanted to make sure that we were keeping in that mindset. But also important, we wanted to make sure that we were accounting for an ability for teachers to collaborate. That's really important too. And again, it actually hugely impacts and benefits the students' experience in the classroom if the teachers have an opportunity to get together and to collaborate and to brainstorm and to come up with best ideas. Another thing we noticed, we wanted to make sure that we were keeping in mind consistency for families. It's really hard for families who are at 2, potentially 3 schools. If you have 3 kids and 2 of them are in ALPS, but one's here and one's at Ammerman, and then you have another kid at a homeschool, that's hard too, and we know that. And so we were trying to keep all of these things in mind when we were coming up with these recommendations.
I think that was something of a typo.
It's supposed to say community. I'll take responsibility. I typed it.
And then we also wanted to make sure that we're keeping in mind the effect on the school community as well. The non-ALPS kids who are at these schools, the non-ALPS teachers, how it impacts them to have kids coming and going and different families in there all the time and trying to make it feel like home. So some of the biggest challenges and constraints that we came up against, the top one absolutely being that currently not one building can hold all of the ALPS classrooms. That's why we're in the position that we are in today, because previously Ammerman has been able to accommodate all the ALPS sections, and this year it wasn't. And so here we are. And going forward, that's going to remain the case. Good news, there are so many bright kids in Northfield schools that we just don't have room for all of them in one building. Transportation and logistics. Because we have kids going to multiple schools, we had to make sure that we had a way to coordinate that reasonably so that, you know, buses have time to get to where they need to be, kids have time to get to where they need to be. The importance of class balancing. This one might not be super obvious, but we discussed at length, if you only have one section of an ALPS 3rd grade, then you're only going to have one ALPS section of 4th grade. And you're only going to have one ALPS section of a 5th grade, which means those kids are with those kids all the way. And if there's a conflict or if there's a relationship that's not super healthy or not serving the kids, there's nowhere to go. So we needed to make sure that we have balanced classroom situations and multiple sections available to make sure that these kids are getting the diversity and social interactions that they need. Again, importance of teacher collaboration. We also discussed that the teachers cannot be expected to move from building to building every year. We will lose the teachers. That is not a reasonable expectation. And then, of course, the time factor. We started this committee several months ago, but the short-term plan, we're under a pretty significant time constraint in what can be done before school starts for the next school year. And then other factors that support.
So we came in with all of these factors and followed a pretty rigorous process from my perspective as a parent. We met 5 times, an hour and a half each as a committee, with that very large committee that you saw, some people virtual, some people in person. We used surveys across the group multiple times throughout as we learned new things. We brought in data, we brought in experts to talk about school space. Brought in people to talk about the various options, the history of ALPS. We learned quite a bit for those of us who hadn't been like deeply embedded in the schools before. And then continued to use surveys, use various protocols to figure out where the pros lie, where the cons lie, and how our thoughts had changed. Because frankly, many of us came into the room thinking one way, and then as we looked at all of these logistics, as we looked at all of the various pieces of the puzzle, found that our thoughts went in a different direction. So it was a mix of large group discussions, small group brainstorming, some really specific techniques. And I know you want to speak a little bit about the thoughtful leaders polarity map that we used as a group of us working very hard to make sure that we were not coming in and just going with our preconceived notions, but we were really balancing.
So what a polarity map is essentially you take 2 different situations. And it's not something when you look at like the pros and cons and weigh them against each other. It simply is a map where, we can pull up some pictures here. Is that you think of, let's say, our current situation, 3rd grade at Silver Springs and 4th and 5th grade at Ammerman. What are all the positives of that model? What are all if we focus too much, and that's up here, yep. And if we focus too much on that, what are some of the possible negative takeaways that could happen if we focus too heavily in that area? And then what we did is we just had another model next to it and did the exact same thing. And Katie, am I correct? We ended up with 6 different maps.
So when we were brainstorming different possible scenarios that we could have for the ALPS program, we came up, I think, with about
3 or 4,
3
yeah.
or 4. And so what you see on the polarity maps are each of those possible combinations. And so when you're looking at it, when you're completing this polarity map, you're not even thinking about this side of it when you're thinking about this side of it. You're only focusing on one side at a time or one area. So it's not, why would this scenario be better than this scenario? You're not thinking about it that way. It's what are the positives of this and what are the negatives, and we only thought about this.
And when we, sorry. And then when we did it, we went through it, we ended up each of the options between the groups. We had 2 groups ended up talking about like the 3rd grade at Silver Springs and 4th and 5th at Ammerman. 2 groups had that on their polarity map, and I believe we had 6 different groups. And then 2 groups would have had 3 buildings by grade. However, they might have had a different one on the other one. This one has the current setup and then the 2 building tracks. So again, we're simply looking at what are the really great things about this and what are some of those possible downfalls of only looking at and only having that particular scenario.
Yeah. So do you look across? So it's just a random 2 columns.
Correct.
Plus minus.
Yes, yeah, and really it is just a really good way of, if you're trying not to like compare 2, you're only focusing on that one. So you're not at all maybe having any internal biases that you might have at the time thinking of comparing one to the other. It really helps take away any bias against another model, because when you're working on this, you're thinking of all the really great things about this. And when you're working on this, you're thinking all the really great things about this. And you're not even thinking about this one, so you're not worrying about where you might be one or the other. Yeah.
But then after you go through that process, then you look at all of them. So when you analyze it after that process, then you look at it in more of a comparison.
I will say it forced us to really focus, like people had a favorite or had a least favorite, it forced us to think about like, even if this is your least favorite option, there are positives.
And we randomly assigned the groupings too, so you weren't going to the space where that was maybe where you were leaning towards that being your favorite. We just did random numbered off and we went to the posters in that way, so.
And so we've been talking about the different scenarios we considered. Keep in mind, again, these were short-term scenarios. We did talk about a lot of things you probably thought about in your head that are truly long-term things, you know, getting a new building, changing anything about the program, all of that is stuff that can't happen by fall 2025. So we talked about it and we landed on these 4 scenarios as the possibilities. So looking at 2 buildings, so 2 grade 35 ALPS buildings, one at Ammerman and one at Silver Spring. We looked at the option of 2 buildings that we have now, 3rd grade at Silver Springs, 4th at Ammerman. We looked at a 3-building option if you did 1 grade at each building and we just changed every year. And then we looked at a 6-building option, which would involve each elementary school having their own ALPS program. So those were the scenarios that we considered throughout most of this month. And so how is it going? I'll turn that over to people who are experiencing it.
I would say it's going very well. We've had great response from kids, great response from parents. I would say, I think the kids that are here feel like they are a part of this building. So let me give you a few examples. Right from the very get-go, we had our Board of Education presentation the 3rd week of school. And there were ALPS kids that filled out applications to present about Silver Springs at that. We have Leadership Day tomorrow. We have kids that filled out applications. Honestly, we had about 42 outside of the classroom student leadership positions for Leadership Day. And I think I had about 842 applications from kids who wanted to have one of those positions outside of their classroom for Leadership Day. The good news is, while we couldn't give everyone an outside of the classroom leadership job, everyone has something to share about their leadership within them. So I firmly believe, and I hear from kids every day, that they feel like they're a part of this community. We have lots of parents who are coming to our PTA meetings, who have signed up to come to Leadership Day tomorrow. So I think we've created a community. It's for this short term, but I think we've created that community and to feel that they're.
And as for Ammerman, I mean, we don't feel much of a change except for the fact that our student population is a little less. We're about 50 students less than last year. Last year we were at 558. Right now we're at 508. So about 50 less students, which is interesting thinking about that there are about 85 of 3rd grade ALPS students. So the one thing that I will tell you that has been, I would think, a benefit to Ammerman this year, as you know, there's some bond work happening. And because of us not housing 3rd grade ALPS this year, we do have construction starting in January. So when we come back from winter break, there will be lots of changes on the exterior and interior as a part of that. And because we're not housing 2-3 additional classrooms, it also means that none of our humanities classes have to be on a cart to go classroom to classroom to classroom, which is what would have happened in that particular case. And we quite possibly, depending on how many classrooms, it would have even maybe moved to losing a library kind of going forward, just because of the number of classrooms that we would have needed when we due to some of the bond construction. So that's kind of the positive of Ammerman this year, and then we look at that. But I think also the other thing to talk about is that Mrs. Booth and I have had lots of conversations about like what does it look like for our 3rd graders as they transition to 4th grade next year at Ammerman, because as you'll see in a minute, that's part of that, and that is the recommendation. Because if we think about it, these 3rd graders are moving as an entire group. So they're moving together. So when they leave Silver Springs, they're leaving with their friends.
And I would add too, based on a great suggestion from somebody sitting in the back right over there, We are doing some things to build connections across the third grade ALPS classrooms. So that when they make that transition to Ammerman next year, they know other kids on a more personal level that they can connect with in the other ALPS classrooms. So once or twice a month, they're kind of moving around. Kids are going from one classroom to another, and they're doing some circles in their classrooms to get to know each other a little bit better so that they can start making those connections and finding those friends on the playground as well. So when they make that transition to Ammerman, they know other kids outside of their own classroom as well.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have a great day in store for our kids that are making that transition, kind of how you think about the fifth graders that go to the middle school and make that sort of transition. They make that a super fun day for them. So we're really looking forward to some of the other plans.
Mrs. Booth, before I talk, will you share the pluses and minuses exercise? You have a different term for it, but you asked the students to share their pluses and minuses.
Oh, they're pluses and deltas,
Yeah, but you have a term for it. What do you call it? Their wishes and wants, I don't know.
glows and grows.
Yes. Because you said when you asked the third graders.
They're worry beads?
Worry beads.
Worry beads,
Yeah.
there you go, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you kind of share?
So that was one of the ALPS students that presented at our board meeting. I asked them what they wanted to talk to the guests about. And they wanted to talk about their transition to third grade ALPS at Silver Springs. And so they shared the things that were going well, and they shared those things that were worry beads for them. And those things that were worry beads for them were those things that would be worry beads, whether they were at Silver Springs or at Ammerman. It was things like, I'm going to miss my friends from my school. I might not know where the music classroom is, or I'm going to miss my teachers from my old building. Those are all the same worry beads that they would have no matter where they went for that third grade ALPS classroom. So I think that's.
Yes, yeah. So what's important to them is like who they're with.
Yeah.
Who their classmates, and so they have their class, but then as you're saying, you're mixing the third grade.
Yep. And that they actually said some of the things that were going well was that their teachers were doing things intentionally to help them to get to know each other, which they would do in any third grade ALPS classroom because they're coming from all 6 buildings. But we've taken that one step further so that they can do some cross classroom activities. So when they make that transition to Ammerman next year, they have connections with other kids outside of the classroom.
So I said in the intro, but there are new people here. I'm a parent of a third grader, so I was going to share how it's going for us. I recognize every family is different, every child is different, every parent is different. So this is our experience. We're a homeschool Ammerman. So we were all set to, we got the ALPS invitation. Great, we're going to stay at our school, and found out, late in the game that, nope, we're going to Silver Springs this year. And it was a shock. And I was nervous about telling my daughter. And I thought, oh gosh, it's going to be a huge change. Is she not going to want to do ALPS? What are we going to do? And so I approached it. She actually heard through the grapevine before I got to tell her because I wasn't sure. But she knew I was going to board meetings and listening and talking. And it turned out it wasn't such a big deal for her. She's like, oh, okay, well, I'll miss my friends. And we talked about, you still get to see them at the bus in the morning. We'll still do Ammerman activities. And then her one biggest worry was she wanted a new outfit for the first day. So new school, new outfit. I said, okay, that's fine for us. So school, it's been going really well. We take the bus, or she takes the bus to Ammerman. She's sitting over there. Is she giving me eyes? Mom, what are you saying about me? She takes the bus to Ammerman, and then the Ammerman kids get on that same bus to shuttle over here. So she gets to see all the other Ammerman homeschool kids who are coming here for ALPS. So she gets to interact with other Ammerman students who aren't in her class. So that's nice. They have fun on the bus. I think they get in a little bit of trouble on the bus, right? Right, just a little bit. And then same thing on the way home, they get back on the shuttle together. They get to see the other Ammerman kids. They go back to Ammerman. She doesn't get off the bus at Ammerman, so she doesn't see her other friends at Ammerman on a daily basis, but then she comes home and rides home with our neighborhood kids. She does do an after school at Ammerman, so we continue that. She does Spanish after school and gets to see some of her Ammerman friends there. So that was a concern. Am I going to stay in touch with my Ammerman friends? So we do that. The other thing we did over the summer is we got in touch with other ALPS families. So there was an ALPS Facebook group started. We did a play date over here. We got in touch with some preschool friends who we went to preschool with, but they went to other elementary schools. So we met up with them, and now she's in ALPS, she's in class with some of those kids that she knew before. And so we do the trunk or treat at Ammerman. We do the trunk or treat at Silver Springs. So I'm monitoring 2 newsletters and trying to stay in touch. It does mean we get to do skate night for both too, which is kind of fun. So that's what we've done. So she'll say, oh, I like the library at Silver Springs, but I miss the playground at Ammerman. So we have really thing. But it hasn't been as big of a shift as we thought. And she knows her friends, her classmates, and they're going back to Ammerman together. So I think she's excited for that. Again, it is our homeschool that we're going back to. So it is like, oh, okay, we know what to expect. But I love the idea of a transition day. So everybody gets to go see the new school, where's the lunchroom, where are the bathrooms, where's the media center. But that's been our experience this year with that unexpected shift. Was actually not as hard as it could be. But I do think finding connections, meeting other families has been important for us. Question?
So what are we doing next year? Or what are we recommending that we do next year for the board? So we are gonna, the recommendation we came as a committee was that we're gonna recommend that we continue to do what was done this year, which is to have the 3rd grade housed here at Silver Springs and then the 4th and 5th grade classes housed at Ammerman. You heard it mentioned earlier. I mean, it was not unanimous. I mean, there were members of the committee who had different opinions on what the preferred model should be. But like I said, a lot of us came into this with different thoughts, perspectives, opinions. I know after I kind of heard what was happening last summer, heading into this school year, I was like, I don't know if I really feel comfortable with that, and I'd like to be part of that. And so I joined the committee, and then that's where I ended up. That this plan that we're doing to me makes the most sense. I was one of the people who voted in favor of that. So one of the things that we had for this school year that we are not continuing for next school is the option to defer your space in the ALPS classrooms. So when the decision was made last year, kind of late in the game for families to make decisions about what they wanted to do, students who had qualified for 3rd grade ALPS were given the option if they wanted to wait and start in 4th grade, they could wait and start in 4th grade. And the number of students who took that option was like less than 10. There were a few that did, but not a lot. And that was something, this was like one of the last things we talked about as a group in terms of, did we want to continue to allow the deferral moving forward? And what we landed on as a committee was that the program that we have is a program. It is ALPS. It is the alternative learning program for students. It's not a talented and gifted. It's not a tag. It's not a gifted. It's the alternative learning program for students. And this essentially, for at least the short term, this is what the program is going to look like. It's going to be a program of 3rd grade at Silver Springs, 4th and 5th at Ammerman. I'll get to it in the next slide in a second, but there's a data component we don't have yet, which is, how does the second transition go? We don't have that data yet because obviously we're going to get that when our current 3rd graders move to Ammerman, and we can ask them. So that first transition, had its highs and its lows like it always does, but how does that second transition go? We don't have that data point yet to be able to make a decision on that. And so in terms of the no deferral option, I don't know, other people in the room who know more from central office or admin could maybe speak to this. I don't know that our 3rd grade teachers have any special training in being a 3rd grade ALPS teacher, but there's a lot of institutional knowledge they have about how to support students transitioning into 3rd grade ALPS. And if we felt to the committee that if we maintain the deferral option, we may have more than just 9 families who opted to defer. And that's putting a big weight on the 4th grade teachers the following year who maybe don't have that institutional knowledge to help students transition into ALPS as 4th graders, as opposed to having a community of students who are all making that transition together as 3rd graders. So we felt that was a hard conversation we kind of had at the end, because we know that the reason we're here as a committee and as a parent community is that we probably would like the perfect world of we only have to transition one time. We only have to move to one building once. But again, given our community constraints in terms of our facilities, the fact that we're not going to grow a building between now and the fall, and everything else that we had to make a decision about whether that deferral option was going to be there. So that's ultimately why we decided not to offer the deferral moving ahead. So students, when they test to enter ALPS and they get that invitation to enter ALPS, they'll either have to say, yes, I'm signing up for this program, which is 3rd grade at Silver Springs, 4th and 5th at Ameren. And if you're choosing not to participate in that, we know that our high achieving students can be well supported in a regular classroom at their home school, perfectly fine. And if they decide that after the 3rd grade year, they want to join the ALPS program, as they always have the opportunity to do, they can retest and reapply as 4th graders. That has always been an option that's available, and that option will continue to be available. And what's different is the students who had that deferral option this year, they don't have to retest to enter as 4th graders next year. So I don't know if I'm making that clear or not, but when students test to enter as 3rd graders, you'll have the decision to say, yes, I'm on board, or no, I want to stay with my home school. If you decide after another year of school, after the 3rd grade year, that maybe you do want to have your student be part of ALPS, that opportunity is still there, but you have to go through the testing process again. Okay. There is going to be, I think it's on the next slide too, maybe, but there is going to be a new committee that's going to get formed. It was mentioned that, when we got together in the fall, we had really one goal, but it was hard to stay focused on that one goal because there was so much to think and talk about. The one goal was to make a recommendation to the board by the January board meeting about what to do. But there's a lot of things to ALPS that require maybe more thought. And so it was decided we couldn't handle that all in the 3 months that we had together. And so there likely is going to be a future long-term planning committee. So if what you're hearing tonight, if you're not feeling satisfied with that or you still have concerns, there'll be an opportunity, obviously, like we had in the fall, to put your name on the form and say, I'd like to be on the committee, and if you might be selected for that, perhaps. So, these are things that we just thought that it was important as parents think about, with the idea, again, that this is going to be what the program looks like going forward. Again, in the long-term planning committee, if they decide, hey, we want to go for a bond to expand the size of a school so we can house ALPS all in one program, then that's a different story. But for right now, this is our program. And so obviously, like it was said at the beginning, we're here to support our kids and our students. So just things we thought was important we think about as parents is obviously that, be positive. I don't know. I think that was really important this year because things came so quickly kind of in the summer and the fall, and nobody really knew kind of how things were going to work out. As you heard from the people who presented a few minutes ago, things are going great. So, I think we just kind of reinforce, especially if you have friends or neighbors who are doing this program now, maybe talk to them about how it's going. And hopefully it's going well for them as well as it is for people who shared stuff tonight. Again, one of the reasons we selected the program we did was so that the ALPS kids would remain with their cohort. So that they wouldn't be scattered. The 3rd grade ALPS wouldn't be scattered across the district. They're all going to be together. So they'll be moving together as a cohort. That doesn't mean they'll be staying with one class, though. I mean, obviously classes will shuffle as they go from 3rd to 4th to 5th. But again, that was another advantage of this program, was it allowed for that shuffling to happen. Whereas if we did different arrangements, maybe that shuffling couldn't have occurred. In terms of how your student is going to get to school, that doesn't change with this program. And it didn't change this year either. If your student is going to take a shuttle to school, you're going to take your student to your home school. You're going to give them a hug and put them on that bus. One bus will depart that school for 3rd grade at Silver Springs, and one bus will depart that school for 4th and 5th grade at Ameren. But the logistics of how your kids are moving around the community every morning and afternoon, there's no changes there. You heard earlier too, the after-school programs, the home schools are still available for after. You still have Kids Club aftercare at your home school. You still have the science programs, the Spanish programs, whatever's going on in your home buildings, and there are special programs they do after school. You heard earlier that there's going to be some sort of a field trip for students to get to visit and meet their new school spaces and new school staff. You heard earlier the value of having a community. And then again, you know, we've been doing this program for at least 30 years. I won't ask you how long, but at least 30 years we've been doing this program. You know, so it's going to look different. And obviously it looked different this year, but we now have a year under our belt. So I would imagine that we'll take a lot of the grow and grows from this year and use those next year, I imagine, from kind of what we experienced this year. Next slide, just wrap it up. So again, so what we are doing, some members of our committee are going to be sharing our plan with the board on January 21st for the board to consider. At the end of the day, it is a board decision. It's really not our decision, but you know, we're presenting, I think, a pretty strong consensus opinion, not a unanimous one, but strong consensus. And you can be on the lookout down the road. I don't know if there's been any discussion about whether that committee would be forming for this year or be for next fall. But more of a long-term planning committee that's going to look at, you know, building capacity, bond programs, potentially changes to the evaluation process to enter ALPS or to be invited to enter ALPS. So there's a lot of things that we wanted to get to that frankly we just didn't have time. You know, we put a lot of time into this, and we're happy with kind of where we ended up. You know, it was mentioned earlier, we're not standing here saying that we have all the solutions and we came up with the perfect answer, but we think this is the best answer for now. And like I said, this can be part of the program as we move forward with the long-term planning committee, looking at the bigger issues of long-term planning. Good.
So we'll open it up for the good of the order. And if you have questions for the committee, certainly raise your hand. And then again, if you have individual questions for after, we're happy to take after. I'm going to start with, what questions do you have for the good of the order? If you don't have questions, that's okay. Go ahead.
So does Silver Springs and Ammerman have the capacity to support potentially 4 classes worth of kids? Since there was like 9 families that deferred, then their straight classes are pretty large. There's space. Yes. Okay.
Similar question, just in terms of pressure testing this. Like, if we have 4 classes of incoming 3rd graders, I think the construction is not going to be done by the start of next school year either, right? So I heard February before we have everything finished.
No, actually, almost everything will be completed by fall. The only thing that will not be done is our library.
Okay.
So we will not have a usable library until around end of October, I'm going to say. But no, everything else will be in place and ready to go on the first day of school.
Okay, that's
Yep.
great.
Yeah.
So if we just look 2 years ahead, not next year, but 2 years ahead, if the incoming 3rd grade class is 4 sections, 10 deferrals come to Ammerman with the current 3rd graders as 4th graders. In 2 years, that's 8 sections for just 2 grades.
When the committee says short term, does that mean until long-term plan is reached or everything is reevaluated?
Yeah, no, until a long-term plan is reached, this is what we're doing. So you can expect this to be the plan until, you know, something else is decided, but no, it will not be reevaluated every year. We have decided, and then once a long-term solution has reached, and you never know, the long-term solution could be the short-term solution, like you don't know, but it is that's where we are.
Just add a thought on that too. I don't remember all the, we already had a lot of dates thrown at us. But like part of our process was Steve Banchero, who's the district's operations, thank you guy, facilities guy. He came in, and we also had a lot of good information from Dr. Weber about bond stuff. So like if there's any thought about expanding building sizes or new building construction, so when we say like long-term plan, like that's probably at least like 3 years from being talked about on a bond. And then in terms of the bond being approved and then the bond beginning construction, like, you know, you're probably looking like a 5 to 10 year window on like a new building or new classrooms being built. to expand the size of ALPS at one program. So just in terms of what is short term and what is long term, like until like long term committee is going to be thinking about bond proposals and what the timeline on that is, and that's a multi-year process. So
Yeah, because our current bond won't even finish construction until,
Well, we don't even start until 2027.
there you go, they don't even start till 2027. Yeah. So,
You mentioned field trip to get to know the new school. What exactly is going to happen with that? That's a detail.
I think it's still in that like overarching thought process, but a lot of it will be most likely Ammerman 4th and 5th graders doing a lot of the talking and just showing around the building. This particular spring is going to be a little weird because we'll say like, there's the cafeteria right now, but next year it'll be the library. Here's this now, but next year it's going to be like, so it's going to be a little strange.
So
I'll
think
be
about
honest.
the like middle school transition day.
Yeah.
How that was, they were there all day, she was there all day for the middle school transition day, it'll be at a smaller scale, think of it as an elementary level of a middle school transition day where they are not gonna eat in the cafeteria like they do when they go to the middle school, but it'll be student leaders kind of showing them the way and telling them those things that they love and care about.
So they'll be there for a couple hours,
Yeah.
3 hours.
Yes.
And make sure it's those fun stuff that we'll do. I'll make sure there's fun activities. The playground will most likely be included because, it's a good, elementary, field trip without a playground. So, yeah, well, it'll be a great day. We want them to leave being excited and, we'll be planning on that, but these are things that probably like May is kind of where we're looking for, and all that.
Just to, add on, I heard the feedback kind of collected that a lot of what the students were sharing about what's important to them is the who. So as you're planning for something like that, I'm glad to hear you're thinking of having the students involved, because having this set of third graders get to know, especially the fourth graders who will still be at Ammerman next year, not just like from a presentation standpoint, but if there's an opportunity for some unstructured time for them to mix together, like that might be an opportunity to just make them feel more comfortable about who they're going to be with next year from the who perspective.
And I think it's also just, going to include Ammerman's current third graders as well, because
Sure.
that will also be fourth graders next year. And we work really, really hard on, we are third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders. We don't designate between, these kids stay in different silos. These kids in this classroom learn a different program, but it's fourth grade lunch, it's fifth grade lunch, and, they go on fourth grade field trips. So we work really hard to ensure that they are still just whatever grade they are in, so that it's one collective community as well.
Thank you guys for responding. I have at Ammerman for ALPS, and when we put out a video a couple of years ago, I just highly recommend that happens. Because the video made the world of difference to my
Even for the orientation.
Yeah, and it just said like, you can be a Brook and Creek Gator and a Bobcat, and we still kind of use that line. Yeah, so thank you. So I suggest that. My question is, could you just review for me, I don't remember, had a second grader as well, the timelines, like when they come out with the letter and when you're testing and when you make the decision, because it's not, I don't know.
So a couple things, ALPS goes through a committee process. So there are teachers, principals, other district personnel that are involved in the placement committee process. The first test that students take that really has an impact is going to be spring of first grade. And that's NWA reading and math. And then it's fall of second grade, NWA reading and math, winter of second grade, which they'll take just after break, I believe, reading and math. And then once those scores are reviewed, letters go out and students are invited to what we call an on-site assessment. It can look a couple of ways. It can be a paper pencil test, or if we need one more data point, it can be a paper pencil test and then something that's called a nonverbal ability test. It looks kind of like an IQ test that students take on the computer. So that I would say, once we have those scores, typically around spring break is when we're testing and getting letters out to families.
So along that note, I have a third grader here this year and I have a second grader
most likely be existing. I knew nothing really of ALPS until I started talking to a friend. She was very helpful, so she kind of encouraged me to learn more. Could you do this presentation for the parents or families that are coming in that are not part of ALPS now? I think this would help. Because I had so many questions that I didn't know, and I know there's a lot going on, but things like this might really help people see what they want to do. And we're actually really reporting this also, just to have it available for parents, because parents might move to the district and not be aware of it.
You might be able to add bits of it to the
Yes.
presentation night.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So bits of it, the
Yeah.
pieces, yeah.
Put one on our pickup and drop off. Yeah. Can we just pick up and drop off directly at the Gulf school or?
Yeah. That actually is, we like that best. But yeah, you absolutely can, however that most convenient for you, works well for us.
So we just keep thinking the teacher.
Or, teachers really don't need to know how they get there. They just show up and they're happy they're there. They're more concerned with how they leave, just so they make sure they leave the correct way.
Just go to the office and they ping the classroom. It's super easy. Yeah, it's really easy. And then they kind of like, ooh, we get to leave early and come late. I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Any other questions?
If we have the 10 deferrals and they're likely to be coming, I don't know if this is something is known at this point, but what does like the timeline look like for hiring teachers if we expect to need more teachers?
So the hiring process, to be honest, the deferral process will be well before the hiring process begins, and that's intentional because in Northville, ALPS or non-ALPS, we want to get the best candidate. And a lot of times that candidate is you're posting in the spring, you're having a very thorough interview process. So that would be a timeline that would be in the spring.
We also look at teachers that we might currently have on staff. That is something that they want to look at too. So teachers across the district always have, no matter what position they're in, the ability to say, hey, if it opens up, I'd like to do this next year. Is that a possibility? And as long as they're certified to do it, then that's something we always consider. So that's also a possibility as well out there.
So you have along with that, is there station that has best practices for this kind of program? Something you haven't mentioned, like these teachers don't have any specific training for ALPS. Could you just touch a little bit on that?
So a lot of our ALPS teachers have been to training by the Michigan Association of Gifted Children.
Okay.
And I would also say our teachers are very skilled in teaching the grade level standards. That's really important. If you're third grade ALPS or regular ALPS, you really need to hone in on those individual grade level standards. But where ALPS teachers really are different is they'll pull in the strands of the higher level standards to really differentiate by student. So I would say that's just educational best practice. But I would also say we have kids every year in families that opt not to go to ALPS. They stay at their home building. And those kids are just fine because again, those teachers differentiate by pulling in higher level standards and challenging students. So I think that's kind of a universal best practice that we do. And that's why, students do something.
I'll just add a quick thought to that too, just because my fourth grader who's in ALPS, and I think it's true for a lot of the kids who transition into ALPS, like their first couple months of third grade are really hard. I don't want to say the word hard, but hard. And, he's a kid who, he could get all of his activities in first or second grade done in 20 minutes and he'd sit there and draw for him because he had all his stuff done. And now he's being asked, he's tired and he's worn out, like he's actually using his brain for the full day as opposed to using his brain for maybe not a full day. Right. And so my comment was just in terms of third grade teachers that may not be specially trained, but it's they know what they're dealing with these third graders who are transitioning in. And so when they go to fourth grade, the fourth grade teachers, I don't want to badmouth them, but they're receiving these kids who've been programmed for ALPS. And so back to just the deferral comment, if you were to have 20 or 30 kids defer and then say, well, we're coming in fourth grade teachers our current fourth grade teachers may not be equipped to deal with that the same way our third grade teachers are equipped to deal with that.
I don't want to say equipped in the same way, but that's not just part of what they do.
Right.
Part of what our third grade ALPS teachers do, and I'm going, is they teach them how to fail. And they teach them then when they failed, it is okay. And they teach them that it's okay that they weren't the first one done. And they teach them that being first isn't always best. So if I had a fourth grade teacher who went then next year to teach third grade, they would do an amazing job, but that's part of the third grade program. So part of the third grade ALPS program is that growth mindset in teaching kids who have always been used to being the number one in their class, that all of a sudden there are 27 number ones. And how do I deal with that? And that is part of what the third grade teachers do the first part of the year. Now, if I took a fourth grade teacher and I turned them into a third grade teacher, they would do that too, but it's not something our fourth grade teachers do because they come in with that experience and that expectation that they've had that in third grade. And so they know how to handle that better. Not saying they know how to handle it better when they get to fourth grade. Is that, I'm hoping that makes sense.
It's something to consider too, and we talked about this, when we talk about what's best for kids, is entering program in third grade and learning all of those things and building that community of learners together and then making that transition over. Is that what's best for individual kids, or is waiting and entering that program a year later where kids have done all of these things together and learned those skills and built that community? It's going to be harder in some regards for those kids who might be entering and waiting until fourth grade because they're not getting that same community building transition, how to fail, how to be resilient as the kids who did it.
And just one little quick thing, and I want to mention, because Chris said it, and I just, it is really important. If your student does not go into the ALPS program, there's absolutely nothing. Or you choose them not to. Our teachers are highly qualified and will differentiate for our high level learners, whether they be in ALPS or non-ALPS. They will continue to do that, just like our kindergarten, first and second grade teachers do that right now. Our non-ALPS third, fourth, and fifth grader teachers do the same. Like we have kids that don't go to ALPS every year or choose not to test, or maybe they miss the cutoff by ever so much. They're perfectly okay. And they have the same, they have the same opportunities for middle school programs that an ALPS kid does, non-ALPS kids do. So that's the other thing to keep in mind too. ALPS isn't for everybody. And you might have a kid that academically is qualified, but it might not be the program for them. And that is okay. I mean, I think that's really important to keep in mind that, yeah, it does happen every year, you know, and every once in a while, we have a kid that goes to the ALPS program and after he goes, not for me, I'm going to go back to middle school. And that is okay too.
So we're right around the hour mark. I think what we would like to offer now is if you have further questions, certainly the committee members will stay after and we'll answer those questions. And just to reiterate, this is being recorded, so we'll send it out to everyone who attended. And then if you know somebody who didn't attend, just let us know. Make sure we get a copy in their hands. So huge thank you to our parents and our committee. I mean, it has been hours of just process and talking about and planning. So a huge thank you to our committee for dedicating so much time. Thank you to all of you for coming tonight. Have a good evening.